We continue our election coverage right now by bringing back political science professor from UC Merced, Dr. Nathan Monroe. Dr. Monroe, thanks for all of your insight over the past few weeks. Nice to finally get a chance to have this post-election talk with you today.
Good morning. Glad to be back.
You know I have to begin by getting your reaction to something you said yesterday morning here on Great Day. Let's take a listen first.
I think it's tonight. I mean, tomorrow you call me out when we talk.
Okay.
When we're in the middle of a hand wringing, sort of long count ahead of us. But I think there's at least a meaningful chance that the results are going to be clear before midnight, right? We're going to get a call, kind of like the old times. And if it is a call early, I think it's a Harris presidency.
Okay. All right. So we're not having to wait until Saturday or whatever to get the results.
Look. This sounds like partial credit, right? I mean, I said it was going to be last night.
No, I'm giving you partial credit.
I think I take 8 out of 10 on that.
Okay.
That seems reasonable.
Okay, it does. But then, were you surprised that the other part didn't happen and that Donald Trump actually is the president-elect?
I was surprised, and I would say that I was more surprised that it was so decisive. I think as I said, I thought that if we had the decision last night, it would be a Harris presidency. That I thought if a Trump presidency, which was possible, occurred, we would have a longer count because we would have tighter races in some of those swing states and maybe more swing states up for grabs, right? Yeah. And so when you see early, right, you see Georgia and North Carolina go relatively early for Trump, and that started to look like, okay, well, now some of these states that in 2020 were, lingered longer, and there were sort of more scenarios and combinations of states that were in play that could go different ways, right? And that was, for me, the surprise was it just was I guess I would say that was for me the biggest surprise, was that it was definitive, more than I would say it was impossibility that it could have been President Trump.
Okay, so and aside from the White House, we have also seen Republicans take the Senate. The House, there are still some races that it is not known for sure, but actually quite a few, over 30 or so. But if the House does go red, how much power does that ultimately give a Trump presidency?
I mean, it offers a lot. I mean, in unified government, you're able to make some, serious policy changes pretty efficiently. That said, I think, it's important to remind that we live in a system that has a lot of checks, and we talk about the checks and balances a lot in terms of, the two chambers of Congress and the presidency and the court and those things. But we also have a federal system, right, that creates a lot of that, and we have just a general system that at a lot of levels sort of moves slowly, even when you're looking for swift change. And so, does it create the platform for them to be able to make some major policy initiatives get through? Yeah, absolutely. And we can look back to some of the early Obama administration and see some of that, on the other side. But, I think there'll be some that will sort of view this as an opportunity for some real unchecked power. And I think that's an overstatement, right? I think that's for those that would say that, might say that that's sort of, it's a little bit of a fear reaction, which I get, for those people that have that perspective. But I would sort of caution a little bit of circumspection in that sense.
Okay, so then that leads me to a question of what do you say to Democrats who are crying this morning?
Well, I mean, I think, maybe I say three things. One is the first we just mentioned. I won't retread it, which is I wrote a missive for those same people in 2016, that were really upset. And I said, look, we have a system that moves slowly. And the Democrats, especially the progressive Democrats, they know this all too well because they want to change policy. They want to move forward. And in times when they have the power to do so, they find it frustrating, right? That change is slow. And so I sort of remind, say, hey, it's two sides of the coin, because it's frustrating for the other side that they're not going to be able to make the changes that they want. And so, ultimately there are going to be some things that you don't like that are going to happen, but there are also going to be some real slowdowns to those things. And we're going to get through that period of time, and there'll be another contest to see, which set of ideas and which set of candidates are going to carry the day.
Mm-hmm. People were saying when they were asked, why are you voting for Donald Trump? And so many were saying, I'm doing this because of the economy. The stock market is soaring this morning. And I know you're a political science professor and not a finance professor, but do you think that that's a good sign for the economy? And is it a reaction, you think, to the Trump win?
Yeah, I mean, it is a reaction. Whether or not it's a good sign, I don't know. I mean, I think historically you do see the stock market bump, up when you get Republican wins in presidential races. That's a pretty well tread pattern. But what I think that, the stock market, especially quick reactions, is a reaction to sort of the optimism of a bunch of people who are going to then trade stocks. And so, yes, there's some wisdom in groups in that way in terms of forecasting, but there's also some errors. And so I would say, it's probably a lot more complicated in the long run as to whether or not that particular reaction is a bellwether for, some sort of economic prosperity. Not saying one way or the other. I just don't know that I put a ton of stock in that in terms of long-term macro trends, where long-term might be 3 or 4 years.
What do you tell your students now about what we can learn from this election and the polls showing something, the outcome showing something different, or even how long this and how change? There was so much change in the lead up to this election.
Well, I think two things. One, nope, there's a famous saying in Hollywood, right? Nobody knows anything, right? And I think that's true here too, right? Increasingly, we see evidence that at very least polls are just getting less and less effective across the board, no matter what strategy they're using. I did see a paper recently by some political scientists that used the economic forecast or the economic conditions for the 120 days before the election and the presidential approval in that same time period. And over a bunch of elections, they've predicted, including this one, they predicted all of the states correctly. And they do this at state level. So, what it might tell us is that we need to move a little bit away from polls in a sense, right? People sometimes I think don't even know why or how they're going to vote because it's such a gut instinct. But the other key thing that I say to my students is the same thing that I said yesterday. It's the same thing that I'm going to say next year, which is a big part of why it's so befuddling and why I think it's so hard for parties to really attract voters is because people have such a hard time stepping outside of their perspective, right? I mean, a lot of our students, as with all college campuses, are very liberal, and they look at this and they think, how could anybody be supportive of Donald Trump, right? How could anyone have those values? How could anyone support that position or that rhetoric? And I think you have to, no matter how hard it is, you have to say, Democrats have to today say, I've got to figure out a way to put myself in the shoes of those, of those blue wall voters that went red this time and ask, what is this, right? They're not aliens. They're not some species that we don't know about, right? They're humans that are reacting in a lot of the same ways in terms of trying to, doing what they think is best for them. And whether we agree with their values or not, in order to be more effective as political strategists, as citizens, as change makers, we have to be able to do that, right? And that's the single most important lesson I try to teach my students in my classes is figure out how to step into someone else's shoes and ask why things are happening.
Well, I'd like you to go into the vice president's shoes right now. We've got about 45 seconds left. She is expected to speak sometime this morning. What do you think she will say or needs to say?
I think she's going to say, exactly what a healthy democracy needs someone to say, which is to say, these are legitimate election results. I'm really disappointed that this is the outcome. Obviously, I wanted to win. Obviously, I had a plan and a vision for what I wanted to do for America. And I'm going to continue to do that in the ways that I can. But ultimately, right, we have to look forward. We have to try to be, come together as much as we can. We have to continue to advocate for our positions. But this is a Donald Trump presidency. Congratulations to him. And hopefully he'll have wisdom and guidance and good people around him to run the country. I mean, and that is the thing to say, right? I mean, that is the cornerstone of a healthy democracy.
It is. Well, Dr. Nathan Monroe, we really appreciate your time, not only this morning, but through the election, and giving us insight and just really enjoyable conversations.
Really appreciate having me on and looking forward to the next round.
Us too. Great day. We'll be right back.